Hi everyone, so here is the next extended essay type question that I wanted to cover, which is generally a 6 marker normally. So again, we'll try and write a little bit more so that you've got a greater chance of getting all 6 marks. Um, so one of the questions that I've seen with this that a lot of people didn't interpret correctly is open source versus proprietary software with regards to someone purchasing it, inverted commas, to develop another app. So someone wants to create an app and they're either going to choose open source software to develop it, or they're going to purchase proprietary software to develop that piece of software. So what I started with is maybe what you should spend some time of just pulling your thoughts together before you tackle these questions, is having some sort of plan in place to tackle it and some of the points that you want to compare and contrast. So be looking for as many of these as you can give in your paper, and this is definitely one I would spend a bit more time planning and definitely reading over when you finish your paper. So let's just rush through these and then we can have a go at recommending which of the two for the use. So open source is usually free. I mean, it's definitely always free to use, depending on whether it's created by a non-profit community or someone who has just released a piece of software. And obviously we need to purchase the software licenses in order to actually use it legally. I've put source code can be modified as a positive and a negative. The positive there is that people can use the source software and modify it without any permission, which means if someone wants to write an additional piece of functionality to make someone's life easier, they can. If anyone fixes bugs, etc. as well, you don't have to wait for that being fixed by the company who look after the proprietary software. You can see here as well that could also be a negative, because or a positive for proprietary, if you like, in that it's not vulnerable to those who wish to exploit it. The fact that people are able to look at the open source code and understand it means that they could potentially exploit it for their own gain. So the fact that some people can edit it is a good and a bad thing. So this is a negative in some ways, and a positive, which we'll go back onto. So proprietary software, the company who develop it, obviously they're making money, they're a business, so they're continually supporting their own updates. They control those updates, and it'd be very easy to keep track of what the current most up-to-date version is with the patches that they would release and so on. So that's less confusing, and obviously they're always driving the development of that. With open source, arguably there's a greater support availability, because depending on the interest level of that particular piece of software, there'll be more support for it, depending how large the community of people are that contribute to forums. And again, that kind of leads us back to the previous point about bugs being fixed with anyone, but could be exploited by anyone who wants to look at the open source of that code. Whereas the proprietary software, the quality of it is always going to be a lot higher, and you'd expect that the level of support offered by the company is going to be greater. Positives at the bottom for proprietary software are that the development side of things, the user friendliness of the interface, you would expect it to be much higher if you're paid for a commercial product. designed with the user in mind. So it's going to be really friendly, intuitive. You're going to expect a lot of help in there, possibly a searchable help facility, more help essentially I would expect rolled out and built into the actual software itself, as well as the expected level of support from the developers. This is potentially going to be a large team of developers who are paid and in those roles to offer support to their users, whereas the the open source software rather, is more likely to be less intuitive, as the people developing it possibly just want to get a product on the market that works, and the fact that it's free, people would have lower expectations. So those are the kind of key points you're looking to have in this. And again, it's really a rubric marking scheme where to get the top marks, you need to demonstrate a really concrete level of knowledge and understanding by addressing these concepts here to support your answer in the discussion. And you need to have a sustained line of reasoning, which basically means that you shouldn't be rambling. Bullet points, for example, is not going to cut it here, and looking for a logical structure to it. So the best logical structure for me is to go through each of these points and kind of have a balanced argument on which is actually the best one for the person to use. Obviously, you'll have to relate back to the question at hand to see what the sort of question stem is, of whether the person has got a lot of money or no money, or they are very skilled or not very skilled, because that can lead back into your answer. So if you're happy with the facts and happy how to address the answer, I would probably just cut the video here. If these are just a case of you want to know what the key points are. But I'm just going to type up what I would like to see in terms of the answer for anybody else who struggles a little bit with the exam technique here, which for our class was actually quite a few people in this one. So let's just get straight into it. So open source software is developed by non-profit companies who release the software for free, whereas proprietary software will be released by a company who must be paid in order to receive the software and licenses for its use. So I'm trying to draw in some of the other sort of key facts. So this can relate back to software licenses in terms of how many machines it can be installed on, in terms of how long you're allowed to use it for. So it's worth knowing a little bit more there. And again, for each of these, depending on the person developing the software, if they have money limitations, it may be better to purchase the open source software. And then we can go on to our next one. Open source software. Anyone can look at the source code. This can be both positive and negative. Anyone who wishes to add new features or fix any bugs can do this without permission. In proprietary software, you must wait for the developer to update and fix any issues and install updates and patches. So that's obviously the compared there. With open source software, however, anyone with knowledge could potentially exploit users by manipulating and editing the code to fit their purpose. So be it stealing data, just distributing viruses, can maybe put that part in there as well, to steal, intercept personal information, or send viruses. This is less likely with proprietary software. Okay, so I'm about halfway through, or not halfway, I've got my first 2 points. So let's move on to the next one. I mean, off the back of that point I've just made there is proprietary software will be much easier to keep track of the current version and updates, as this is controlled by the developer. Avoiding confusions with the different versions of open source. The level of support should be greater with proprietary software, as you would expect a paid team of support to deal with issues and fix them in a timely manner. I mean, that's part of your expectations if you purchase a software license. With open source, this may not happen directly with the developer, but with a large community of developers and experts who are using the software. This will depend on how popular the software is, and not necessarily supported by the open source software developers. So that's us up at least halfway. So again, we've covered bugs being fixed by anyone with access, covered the support availability, covered the continuous development, and the less confusion, the fact they can't edit source code. So it's just a good idea just to make sure you're ticking those off. We've covered the fact that people could maliciously exploit our code, and then we can cover the sort of level of help. So we can go back to the idea. Again, this question stemmed from someone developing an app. So with regards to use of the software, the proprietary software should be easier to use, as the development will be focused on the needs of the end user. This will mean that the interface will be easier to use, more intuitive and user-friendly, as well as looking better. This will mean that using online help and built-in functionality will be easier compared to open source, because having software which looks good is not going to be a priority of the company developing it. So again, hopefully you can see for each of the points I've tried to relate it back to the question, I could go back through and improve that. As you can see here, I've related it back to whether they would buy it or not. Let's see, less likely with proprietary software. So we've always tried to compare the points that I've made there. So could improve these with parts here, perhaps saying something like if the person developing the app is an expert. Again, these are just could improve these a bit as well. If the person developing the app is an expert, they may have success using the open source, but less skilled may wish to consider using proprietary software. And again, just try with all of these points to link it back. So explain them, each point, compare and contrast them, and then relate it back to which one you recommend and why. So hopefully I've managed to do it for each of mine here. I've addressed all of the points that I've come up with. You can see I've got a sort of logical development there where I've made each of my points and compared and contrast them each time, rather than just having a ramble about open source and then another ramble about proprietary. I've tried to address the balance using the positive and negative. Now this part here, I wouldn't expect to see that in your paper. That was more just for me to plan out what I was going to write, but there's nothing to say you can't write that on another page somewhere else. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Obviously you can ask for extra paper in your exam, maybe note it down on the back page, whatever it happens to be, and then this actual written part is what they'd expect to see. Good luck with these, and really need to practice them, as 6 to 8 mark exam based questions are definitely going to make the difference between those achieving 9s and 8s, and really can make a difference to your passing grade.